In this episode, we talk about the plan to induct people from the transgender community into the armed forces. We also talk about the highly anticipated India versus New Zealand semi-final. But first, we talk about the drug problem in Maharashtra and what the recent raids reveal about it. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In the past 4 weeks, law enforcement agencies in Maharashtra have conducted a total of 6 factory busts across the state.
A factory bust basically is where it's the source is cutting the head of a problem. It is where the drug is being manufactured.
That's Indian Express's Mohamed Thaver.
So you have to understand that it starts like there's a peddler who's selling drugs. Then you go above them, there's a chain of 3-4 more peddlers. Then they get a supplier. And eventually right at the top of the link are the guys who manufacture it in a factory. So a factory bust basically means you've curbed the source of it.
And to put things in context, between 2019 and 2023, a total of 6 factory busts had taken place. But the 6 factory busts this time took place just within a month.
So in 1 month, because these many factory busts were happening, one realizes the scale of the problem and that the ease with which it was happening, You've got factories in Solapur, you've got factories bust in Pune, you've got factories bust in Nashik, in Palghar. So suddenly you realize the scale at which things are being made. Like there are isolated nooks and crannies. So maybe these were operating earlier as well, but it is now that law enforcement agencies are kind of working on it and doing this. So this clearly points to the fact that synthetic drug production is happening on a large scale, especially like I was told in states like Gujarat, Maharashtra and Hyderabad, Telangana. These are states where this synthetic drug, especially mephedrone production, is happening quite a bit.
Yeah, and Mohammed, one obvious thing that these busts reveal is that a lot of manufacturing is taking place locally, unlike, say, drugs coming in from the Afghanistan route, for example.
Yeah, so see, that is the thing. Like to understand why there are so many factories coming up is also to understand the difference in the drug trade. So back in the day, so there was either charas ganja, which is a locally made thing, which is at the base. And then when it came to high-end drugs, it was cocaine, which is made from cocoa plant, which is in South America. So good quality cocaine came from South America.
These are all plant-based drugs.
These are all plant-based drugs. And then hashish came from Afghanistan. Now, over the past decade, there has been a rise in the use of synthetic drugs. Synthetic drugs meaning drugs that are made in the factories chemically. It could be mephedrone, it could be MDMA. So that synthetic drug thing has happened over the years. And also, people use like alprazolam tablets that otherwise used as anti-anxiety pills. They're using that to get a high. So these chemical-based drugs, which are far more harmful, have come into the picture. And the popularity of mephedrone.
This is the drug which is also called meow meow.
Yeah, so mephedrone is called MD, it's called meow meow, it's called MCAT. And the rise of the popularity of this drug is in a way also responsible for mushrooming of these factories. Because if you see, of the 6 factories that were bust, 4 were manufacturing mephedrone. So now the deal is mephedrone, like earlier was unheard of in the 2010s and all. I'm not talking about Mumbai. Since 2010, due to various reasons when there was supply of mephedrone is believed to be a cheap knockoff of cocaine. So, for example, a gram of cocaine which would cost you 10,000 will cost you, I believe, 5,000 or something when it comes to mephedrone. It looks the same, it's supposed to give you the same high, etc.
So it's just half the price.
Yeah, it's half the price because you have to understand that cocoa, like cocaine, it is coming from South America. So the overheads at every stage kind of make it more expensive here. Like to manufacture mephedrone, like a gram of mephedrone, they say it costs 20 to 30 rupees. And in fact, a gram is not even sold at 5,000. It is sold at around 2 to 3,000. So it is like 20-30% of the price of cocaine. So what happened is in the 2010s and all, apparently due to some shortage in supply or something, the rise of mephedrone started happening in Mumbai. And mephedrone by then was not even a banned restricted substance under the NDPS Act. From 2010 to around 2015, there was a drastic rise in the use of mephedrone. In 2015, finally the drug was banned, but even after that, its use continues unabated.
And could you talk a bit about the demand and supply side of this drug? Because you write that both contribute to it being so popular.
So demand side, because one, it is very cheap. It gives you a high immediately. A lot of people also think of it as a sex enhancing drug. They think of it as a substitute for Viagra. So that is also one of the reasons of its popularity. And fourth, the easy availability of it. On the supply side, see, for example, if you need to get cocaine from South America, you need to smuggle it through the airport, this and that. Here, you set up a factory. You need a chemist who knows how these chemicals work. These chemicals are not very difficult to procure. And you are like spending around 20-30 rupees per gram and you're selling it for 10 times its value. So it's very profitable for them. So this demand and supply meeting, because of this, the demand has shot up. People have realized how people have been making 1 crore a month just manufacturing this. So people have realized how profitable it can be. And for setting up a factory, you just need one factory. You can take on rent for a month. You can cook a batch of 20-25 kgs. It's a 5-day cycle, cooks around 20-25 kgs and you get 1 crore a month. So it is profitable and both sides are happy in that sense. So that's the reason this drug has become very popular, which has seen more and more people kind of get into this to make money. People have realized how profitable it is.
Right, and the other thing to consider is that because it's a lot cheaper, it comes with its own health hazards, right?
Yeah, so mephedrone, because it is kind of low quality, really its impact is much worse than other drugs. People say that synthetic drugs, the chemicals are it can change your face structure. It is that bad. So, but because it is a cheap knockoff and things like that, but it really has some long-term harmful effects.
Okay, so these drugs are inexpensive to make. They can be produced locally and their units are easy to set up. What are some other patterns that these recent raids have revealed?
See, pattern in the sense what we have seen is that some of these are people who have had no drug cases in the past. Like earlier, there were these specific gangs who would be selling this person has 5 cases. But now, there's this one person arrested in Solapur. He wanted to get into politics, realized that he will need a lot of money and he hears about this and he kind of gets into this. So we have seen people who don't have priors, people who have been into the pharma industry, who know about this, and people like this getting into it.
Because you don't need a lot of connection with established drug lords?
Exactly. And especially if you have, and you will need, because somebody to cook mephedrone, and that person is called a doctor. And so if you are from the pharma industry, you know how to source these chemicals. So in that sense, you get a cook, a doctor, and then that's it. I mean, that person will know how to procure it. You rent an industry. There are a lot of sick units. There are Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporations where there are a lot of factories. So you just rent one of those factories, you do your stuff. People don't realize. The only thing that they have to do when they set up a factory is that when you cook mephedrone, it tends to stink a lot. So they say it stinks like stale urine. See, so when you're also manufacturing this, you have to ensure that it is under wraps. So the two things that they have to keep in mind, one is the smell of it, and second is the refuse that comes out. So to mask the smell, they do a lot of things. So for example, a lot of times they cook in monsoon, because that when it's raining and all the chemicals, the kind of the smell is masked. So that is a season where there's a lot of manufacturing happens. Then they, two of the industrial factories that were bust, one was near a poultry farm, one was in a chiku orchard. So that kind of masks the smell. Some cook near gutters, some cook near tanneries. So, and mephedrone is such a thing that you actually don't even need an entire factory setup. There have been cases where people cook it in a house, there's a setup laboratory in the house. So, that is how things are, which is also the reason why, it has become so popular, because you don't need connections, you don't need anything. In fact, you have a room and, you have the right connections, and people have been found to be doing that as well. So these are the few things that they have to ensure that it doesn't smell that much. And the second thing is the refuse, for which in the factory bust that took place in Pune, they had dug a pit, and in the pit they would have sawdust and they would have other refuse, and they would just put the leftovers in that and bury it and just cover it. So these are some small precautions that they have to take.
And you said that the police have found it hard to track a lot of these factory units. And one of the reasons is that a lot of these businesses are actually family run. Can you tell us why that is?
So the reason that such a thing is happening as per cops is that, see, when you are manufacturing or when you are into this narcotic manufacturing thing, there is a chance of the information slipping out. So they have to, one, ensure that the operation, that the number of people involved are very less. So for example, in a normal even factory setup, there are around 3 to 4 people. And when it comes to kind of handling the entire thing, the only people that they tend to trust are their family members. Because you have to understand that tomorrow, if I give a tip off to the police, I may get a good reward from the police as well. So there will always be that temptation that, okay, I spill the beans to the cops, get money from them and not have any future problems. So it is only in case where you personally also stand to lose is where you, that temptation goes down. So hence, like a cop said, that it's run like a cottage industry, now that you will involve your brother, your cousin, because you really need people whom you can trust. Because once, if there is anybody if that information goes out, and forget telling the cops, even if you are a bit careless and you end up telling somebody, then that the thing tends to kind of, leak out. So you need people who will also stand to lose if such a thing happens. And hence more and more we've seen that, siblings, family members, people whom you can completely trust are, seen heading these operations.
And Mohammed, lastly, the fact that these units operate locally raises questions about the local police as well. When you spoke to experts, what did they have to say about it?
See, generally what even agencies that bust narcotics and things like NCB, they say that if the local police station is vigilant enough, this problem will never happen. Because see, like an NCB is looking after 3 states. It's very difficult but a local police station has a limited area and this is happening in that area. So there are 2 things here. Either one is that they are on the payroll and the other thing is that they are being a bit careless. Like in some cases, like in the Palghar case, what had happened is they would come and they would cook. They would not take the help of any local. So cops said that, it was difficult for that thing to leak out. But, a lot of officers I spoke to say that, when you're manufacturing this, it is very difficult to completely be under the, off the radar. And that if local police stations are aware about it, they know that such a thing is happening, they are the best line of defense when it comes to this. If they are vigilant, such a thing cannot happen. So they don't rule out that in some cases, it is quite possible that, they may be on the payroll or something, but there is also that case of negligence, there is also a case of carelessness. And like when I went to Palghar, the cop said that after this happened, like in Palghar, it was being manufactured in a farmhouse. So they then went to all other farmhouses and they checked and all of that. So yeah, local police stations have a big part to play in this because they are your first line of defense.
And next we talk about the introduction of transgender persons in the armed forces. Earlier this year, a panel of high-ranking officials from the armed forces initiated discussions on whether they could incorporate individuals from the transgender community into their ranks. Highly placed sources in the force have told the Indian Express that several proposals were submitted regarding the integration, along with the concerns that were raised about this entire process. To know more about these deliberations and the concerns, my colleague Utsa Sarmin speaks to Indian Express's Amrita Nayak Dutta in this segment.
Amrita, we understand that the armed forces are deliberating on whether to enlist people from the transgender community. So can you tell us when this deliberation began and what prompted it?
So, Utsa, deliberations have been underway for the last several months. A joint study group was constituted by the Principal Personnel Officers Committee, which is the PPOC, and it had met in August this year. And on this joint group, or the joint study group, which will be headed by a senior officer in the Directorate General of Armed Forces Medical Services, the DGAFMS, that was tasked with deliberating on the implications of the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019 and also suggesting way forward for its implementation in the defense forces.
Right, so the committee is examining the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019 for this. Could you tell us a bit about this act and how are the forces looking at it?
So, Utsa, right now deliberations are on at the senior level, and the Army particularly has asked various line directorates to give its comments and suggestions on how this can be done in the armed forces. The Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019 was brought in January 2020 to protect the rights of transgenders and prevent their marginalization and discrimination in healthcare, education, employment, public services, and other benefits. Now, the armed forces at present, they do not recruit transgender persons or people identifying themselves as homosexuals. The armed forces are currently just deliberating on the act and its implications. The Army's Adjutant General's branch has recently sought comments from its line directorates on the feasibility of employing transgender people in the force, possible employment avenues, and the roles they could perform in the military.
So, Amrita, you've mentioned that most of the directorates submitted their suggestions about this. Can you tell us what have they suggested and what kinds of roles are being looked at for transgender people if they're going to be integrated into the armed forces?
So most of the directorates, it's true, they have already submitted their comments and suggestions, and the deliberations on them are at a very preliminary stage right now. We still don't know whether they will be posted in field area or in peace stations, and what are the kind of roles they would be able to play, given that any employment in the military is merit-based and selection-based, and military is not just an employment opportunity. And a range of suggestions have been received and they are being examined at a top level. And as per my sources, what I have come to know is that some have insisted on not providing on any special concession to transgender persons if they were to join the military in terms of training or the rigorous selection standards or postings in difficult locations. Some have also pointed out to various administrative and logistical difficulties such as housing and other infrastructure that could be specific to transgender people. I must also say that there have been some questions pointed out about how they and their spouses, if any, would be identified in the military, and also their overall cultural integration, with other serving military personnel as and when they are inducted in a gradual and phased manner.
And Amrita, your sources also mentioned certain concerns and challenges that the armed forces may face if this integration takes place, right?
That's right. There have been talks, there have been internal discussions about administrative challenges such as lack of housing and toilets, particularly in field locations where there is a paucity of resources and space. As you would know, Utsa, that the military has increasingly started recruiting women, and even for them, the infrastructure currently is not really adequate in border locations and in difficult locations. So that itself is being tackled now. And when transgender persons are recruited, so there could be some administrative challenges initially, which is being discussed. And also, some people have raised concerns that restricting their postings only to peace stations and not to field areas would actually cut opportunities for those who would be wanting a peace tenure after serving their field tenure. So those are the issues which are being discussed. As I said, they are all in a very preliminary stage. Nothing is concrete right now. The Army has been bringing a lot of changes in its recruitment policies. For example, induction of more women, not just the Army, overall the armed forces, and induction of Agniveer. So these are some of the changes which are being brought. And as a result, recruiting of transgender people is still at a very preliminary stage. They're still at a discussion level, and we are yet to see what concrete action does the armed forces go in for when it comes to their recruitment.
And in the end, we talk about the highly anticipated 2023 ICC World Cup semi-final clash between India and New Zealand, set to unfold this afternoon at the iconic Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. India and New Zealand are two of the most evenly matched teams in the world and have a long history of close and exciting contests. As the teams gear up for this crucial fixture, India finds themselves riding high on the back of a brilliant performance in the league stage, winning all 9 of their group matches, including a 4-wicket victory over New Zealand in Dharamshala. Though on the flip side, New Zealand enters the match with a considerable sense of assurance. Despite facing their fair share of ups and downs, they have emerged as one of the most consistent teams on the world stage over the past few years. In fact, they have been runners-up in 2015 and 2019. Now the stage is set for a riveting encounter between these two cricketing powerhouses. And what will be particularly interesting is the second inning. Turns out the team batting second will face a unique challenge at this location: the sea breeze. Here, Indian Express's Amit Kamath explains why.
Let me just quote Nadeem Menon, who used to be a curator at Wankhede back in the day. There's a saying in Mumbai that if you are batting in Mumbai, that too in the evening, then wait for the first 10 overs. That's when the evening breeze is passing by. Respect that, because it can cost a batsman his wicket. Now, to kind of reiterate what Nadeem Menon means, if you just look through the scores of the team batting second at the end of the first power play, in the last few matches, they read thusly: 67 for 4, 35 for 3, 14 for 6 and 52 for 4. All of them, the teams batting second, never actually went on to recover from that collapse, except for Australia, who needed a Glenn Maxwell-like innings.
For more World Cup related updates and in-depth analysis, be sure to tune in to our ongoing special series on the Express Sports podcast, hosted by Amit Kamath and Mihir Vasavda. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, with help from Utsa, Sarmin, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.